In the fragile stillness before dawn on September 2nd, 1666, London lay vulnerable, dry, crowded, and dangerously unprepared. The summer had been long and rainless, leaving the city brittle like kindling. Timber houses, coated in pitch and tar, leaned precariously over narrow streets where sunlight barely reached the ground. Beneath this maze of wood and shadow, thousands of lives were bound together in tight proximity, unaware that within hours, their world would begin to burn. The fire began quietly, almost insignificantly, in the bakery of Thomas Farriner on Pudding Lane. A stray spark, a moment of neglect, whatever its exact cause, it found perfect conditions to grow. By the time the household awoke, flames were already climbing the walls, licking hungrily at beams that had dried for months. The alarm spread too slowly. In a city without organised emergency response, reaction depended on human instinct, and instinct, in the face of uncertainty, often hesitates. As the flames broke free from the bakery, they met the wind. A powerful easterly gust surged through the streets, transforming the fire into a living force. It leapt from rooftop to rooftop, igniting entire rows of houses in moments. Sparks flew like swarms of fireflies, carried across alleys and landing on distant buildings, starting new fires before the old ones had even finished consuming their prey. At first, many Londoners did not grasp the scale of the danger. Fires were common in the city, and most were contained quickly. But this was different. Within hours, the glow in the sky intensified, turning night into a flickering orange twilight. Smoke thickened the air, creeping into homes and choking those still asleep. When people finally understood, panic replaced hesitation. Survival began with a choice: what to save and what to leave behind. Families scrambled through their homes, grabbing valuables, coins, jewellery, legal papers, while abandoning furniture, clothing, and tools that had taken years to acquire. For the poor, even this choice was a luxury. Many had nothing to gather, only their lives to protect. The streets filled rapidly. Crowds surged in every direction, some heading toward the open grounds beyond the city, others toward the River Thames, hoping to escape by boat. The river became a corridor of desperate movement. Barges and small vessels were overloaded with people and possessions, while others waded into the water, clutching what they could carry. The sound of the fire was relentless. It roared like a storm, a constant thunder of collapsing beams and exploding heat. Glass shattered, roofs caved in, and entire buildings seemed to sigh before giving way. The fire did not move evenly. It surged and twisted, driven by the wind, sometimes doubling back, sometimes racing ahead, unpredictable and unstoppable. Efforts to fight the blaze were chaotic and insufficient. London relied on rudimentary methods: leather buckets passed hand to hand, primitive fire engines that could pump only small amounts of water, and the demolition of buildings to create fire breaks. But these measures required coordination and decisiveness, both of which were in short supply. The Lord Mayor, Thomas Bloodworth, hesitated at a critical moment. When advised to pull down houses in the fire's path, he reportedly dismissed the urgency. By the time the order was given, the flames had grown too powerful. The delay would prove catastrophic. As the fire spread westward, it consumed everything in its path: homes, shops, warehouses filled with oil, coal, and other flammable goods that only fed the inferno. The city's design worked against its people. Narrow streets trapped heat, while overhanging buildings allowed flames to leap effortlessly from one side to the other. It was a perfect storm of urban vulnerability. By the second day, the fire had reached the heart of London. Landmarks that had stood for centuries were now under threat. Among them, St. Paul's Cathedral rose above the city, its stone walls offering a false sense of security. Many believed it would survive, that its size and strength would shield it from destruction. Refugees gathered there, bringing their belongings and seeking shelter within its vast interior. But the cathedral was not immune. Scaffolding surrounded parts of the building due to ongoing repairs, and booksellers had stored large quantities of paper and parchment in its crypts. When the fire reached St. Paul's, the heat became unbearable. Flames engulfed the structure, and soon the lead roof began to melt, pouring down in molten streams. The cathedral, once a symbol of permanence, collapsed into ruin. Its destruction shattered any remaining illusion of safety. Fear deepened into something darker. Rumours spread that the fire was no accident. England was at war, and suspicion fell on foreigners, particularly the Dutch and the French. In the chaos, mobs formed, attacking anyone they believed to be responsible. Innocent lives were lost not to the fire, but to fear and anger. Survival now meant avoiding both flame and violence. Amid the devastation, leadership finally emerged. King Charles II of England stepped in, recognising that conventional methods had failed. He ordered the use of gunpowder to demolish buildings on a large scale, creating wide gaps that the fire could not cross. It was a drastic measure, destroying parts of the city to save the rest, but it was necessary. Explosions echoed through London as entire streets were blown apart. The ground shook, and debris filled the air. These controlled destructions began to slow the fire's advance. For the first time, there was a sense that the inferno might be contained. Still, the struggle continued. For 4 days and nights, the fire raged, fueled by wind and the city's own structure. It consumed over 13,000 homes, leaving tens of thousands homeless. Churches, guild halls, markets, centres of community and livelihood were reduced to ash. For those who survived, the aftermath was a different kind of ordeal. With their homes gone, people gathered in open fields beyond the city. More fields became a sea of makeshift shelters, tents, carts, and piles of salvaged goods. Families huddled together, exposed to the elements, uncertain of what would come next. Food and clean water were scarce. Disease threatened to follow in the wake of the fire, as overcrowded conditions and poor sanitation created new dangers. The trauma of what had been lost weighed heavily on everyone. Generations of work, memory, and identity had vanished in days. Walking through the city after the fire was like entering another world. Streets were unrecognisable, reduced to blackened pathways lined with smouldering ruins. The air smelled of ash and burnt timber. Heat still radiated from the ground, and smoke lingered, obscuring the sky. Silence replaced the former noise of daily life, broken only by the occasional collapse of a weakened structure. Yet, even in this devastation, there were signs of resilience. Londoners began to rebuild almost immediately. They sifted through ruins, searching for anything that could be salvaged: tools, metal, fragments of their former lives. Communities reformed, offering support and sharing resources. The fire also brought change. The dangers of the old city had been exposed, and new regulations were introduced to prevent such a disaster from happening again. Buildings would now be constructed from brick and stone rather than wood. Streets would be widened. Urban planning, once an afterthought, became a priority. Survival, in the context of the Great Fire of London, was not just about escaping death. It was about enduring transformation. Those who lived through it witnessed the end of one London and the beginning of another. They carried the memory of fire, the sound, the heat, the loss, and used it to shape a safer future. In the years that followed, London rose again. New buildings replaced the old, stronger and more resilient. Life returned, markets reopened, and the city regained its vitality. But beneath its renewal, the scars of 1666 remained, a reminder of how quickly everything could be taken away. The Great Fire was a test of endurance unlike any other. It revealed the vulnerability of a medieval city and the strength of the people who called it home. In the face of overwhelming destruction, they adapted, survived, and rebuilt. And so, the story of London in 1666 is not only one of fire and loss, but of resilience, of a city and its people who refused to be consumed, even as the flames closed in around them.